I don't know why government's ever involved with retail to begin with. You tax the product, you get the tax from the product, the revenue from that source, and you use it for things like healthcare, education, and infrastructure. So that's the clearest path to end political patronage in cannabis, NB, and alcohol, New Brunswick. But so long as it stays a Crown agency, I think there has to be some protocols in place to ensure that that political patronage, especially when we're talking about the high-ranking salaries, because that's really the issue. And again, I get back to what I said earlier in relation to direction to these Crown agencies. I would not want, if I was in government, a CEO to not want to privatize cannabis NB. As a governing party, I would want the CEO as well as the directors to have a vision to privatize cannabis NB, or alcohol New Brunswick, or whatever Crown agency is there, that the direction we would set forth. So the government has to have the ability to be able to set a direction, to set a vision for a department, for Crown agencies, on whatever they're elected on. But there is a difference between setting a vision and ensuring that that vision is carried out, and simply giving people jobs because they're part of your political party or your big donors or whatnot, to try to give a little back to them because they gave so much to you to get elected. There's a difference there. And that is where the fine-tuning of legislation and policy needs to be really distinct. Because what you don't want is, you don't want policy being so rigid, or legislation being so rigid, that government's handcuffed to be able to set a vision for a department or for a Crown agency. So there is balance. And I think when we talk about the motion that is at hand, you talk about an independent and impartial and a third-party search firm to be engaged to conduct the search, interview candidates, and submit its hiring recommendations. That's reasonable, so long as, again, there is a certain direction to which the government wants that Crown agency or that department to go. Because, again, governments are elected to govern. And governments get there because they campaign on certain items, they put forward certain messages that they want the direction of New Brunswick to go in. And it's very important in that's not lost. So while I agree with the motion, and I agree with the fact that you do need more independence, you do need impartiality, that you have to put up barriers to ensure that governing parties don't use these high-paying positions just to reward their supporters. And we have seen that. And again, I'm being comical when I talk about the Liberals putting it forward. I mean, we've seen it from both parties for decades. This is the way they operate. So there does have to be some checks and balances to ensure that those things are mitigated. I don't think you'll ever eliminate it, but to mitigate it, to ensure that these things don't happen the way that they have been happening over the last several decades. That's why when you look at the motion itself, it does talk about third party, it talks about independence and impartiality. So it's always to strike that balance to ensure that, again, government can set the direction, government can lay out the vision, and in order to set out the direction and lay out the vision, you have to have people within those departments, within those Crown agencies, whether they're boards or whatnot, to help do that. And that's why, when you talk about board appointments, well, what's the pay? If you're talking about a board appointment where the director, would receive, travel and a meal, I don't think anybody's going to be too bent out of shape if it's a board of director that has a certain vision that the governing party, whichever it is, helps lay that out. But when you're talking about salaried positions and CEOs of companies making $150,000, $200,000+ a year, and if you see these positions filled by people that frankly just aren't qualified for the position, but because they hold a certain card, red or blue, they get the job, that's where it becomes problematic. And that's where the people of New Brunswick get very frustrated with the political patronage appointments. So in general, Madam Speaker, I'll just conclude. not missing the humor of this motion from the source, but also recognizing there's certainly some merit to it, and I do appreciate the resolve clause that does give that independence and impartiality as it relates to the hiring process for the president of both ANBL and Cannabis NB. Thank you, Madam Speaker.